Hey everybody, Michael Davis here, and welcome to Bone2Pick. I am really excited to be sitting down today with one of my favorite musicians and one of my favorite people I've ever gotten to work with, the great Charles Pillow. Charles is one of the premier woodwind instrumentalists anywhere in the world. He's an internationally acclaimed jazz artist with 9 recordings to his credit. His last 2, Electric Miles and Electric Miles 2, with his large ensemble, have garnered both critical and popular acclaim. He's appeared on over 100 CDs with a range of artists, including Brad Mehldau, John Scofield, Michael Brecker, Luther Vandross, Wynton Marsalis, David Sanborn, Jay-Z, Paul Simon, Bruce Springsteen, Joe Henderson, Maria Schneider, and Bob Mintzer, just to name a few. He's professor of jazz saxophone at the Eastman School of Music. He's active worldwide as a guest artist and clinician. He's composed for big band, for studio orchestra, for woodwind quintets, for chamber ensembles, and he has held down over 25 chairs on Broadway shows, in addition to being very active as a studio musician here in New York. And before we jump into the interview with Charles, just want to encourage everybody to subscribe to us on YouTube, share our videos if you like what you're hearing, like us on Facebook, all that kind of good stuff. But help us spread the word so we can keep doing these, and we look forward to bringing you more great content like we're going to hear today with the great Charles Pillow. So without further ado, here's our interview. Charles Pillow, thank you so much for coming.
Mike, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've really been looking forward to this for a long time, and we're finally getting it done today. So let's jump in and talk about your early years. You grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Obviously, very rich musical history down there. What got you into music and specifically led you to the saxophone?
I was fortunate that my high school band director had spent time on Woody Herman's band. As a matter of fact, he was in the band that Carl Fontana was in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
His name was Lee Forshey.
Okay.
Carl, I think, got him on the gig.
Wow.
And he didn't stay for very long. I'm not sure the years, late 50s, early 60s. Anyway, he didn't like being on the road, so he got a job teaching high school in the area and was legendary by the time I got there. And he made it cool to be in the jazz band. He got along with the athletic people, football players loved him. We did marching band and all that stuff too. So he had a coexisted with the art part of it and then the sports. So like I said, he made it kind of cool to be, playing jazz and improvising. And so he was a big influence. As far as the saxophone goes, my older brother played saxophone.
Oh, really?
And that kind of got me into that.
Wow, cool. That's great to be exposed to improvisation at such an early age, because it can be intimidating for all of us still.
Absolutely.
Right?
He actually, I think they called it, the chair he played on Woody's band, I think was called the screech chair. Have you heard of that terminology at all? Just playing all the things up an octave or whatever.
Okay.
But he had the reputation of also being kind of like a Miles-ish kind of soloist. So he'd play for us sometimes, and I think we had some sort of combo class. I barely remember, but he would just play like quarter notes, almost like Freddie Green or something playing,
Wow.
And he was very important to a lot of the Louisianians, and he kind of made it a thing to do.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, that's such a historical thing that trumpet players playing high notes. It's like, it's my personal mantra. I've never heard a chord that couldn't be improved with a high note. Make friends with trumpet players that way. Try it sometime. Well, let's jump ahead to your the college experiences. Starting with your undergrad at Loyola. How'd you find the program there, and how'd that work for you?
I started out back in those days. North Texas State was the big place to go.
Right.
If you were from the South, and I sent them an application, and I tried to get into that situation, and I didn't hear back from them one way or the other. I mean, you had to mail it in.
So sure.
I'm assuming it got lost in the mail, but I don't know. So I never heard back from them. So in high school we would go to New Orleans for jazz fests at Loyola. So that kind of became the obvious place to go in Louisiana. And I kind of wanted to stay close. And that ended up being really, really great for me because as you know, Bob Shepard had just gotten the gig. I was his first year, and he had just come from Eastman. He stayed for a couple of years, and then there was some other Eastman people. So that kind of got me into the Eastman pipeline.
Wow.
But yeah, Bob was great. He was very, very hard, very strict. He was hard on his students, strict. He was the guy that made me realize, probably sounds strange, but that you had to practice every day. Like on the weekends, I thought, I go hang out with my girlfriend. But he's like, what are you doing? Like you got to, every day. I don't care whether it's your birthday or every day is a day to practice. So that for me at the time, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
very cool.
Yeah, he was great.
I didn't realize, I know Bob very well. I didn't realize that he taught at Loyola.
Yeah,
I guess before he moved out to LA, obviously.
For 2 years, and then he went out there. I remember everybody was really impressed that he had done some recording with Chuck Mangione, who was really big,
of course,
in 1977. So, but and then he went to LA, and that was it. You know?
Well, let's talk a little bit about Eastman. That's where you and I first met, and I think, if I have our chronology right, I think I was a senior and you were a first-year grad student.
That's right.
I think we crossed that 1 year and became really good friends right away. Everybody liked you immediately, and pretty much nobody liked me at that point, but you were kind enough to put up with me a little bit. But we met there, and what was, looking back on it now, I have very fond memories and got a lot out of Eastman. I think the thing that I got the most out of was just being around students like yourself and all the other great players that were around, Jeff Beal and John Fedchock, and list is very long that we got to Dave Fink and all the players, Dave Radicek, who's sadly no longer with us. But of course, anyway, what would you? I was gone after that first year, but what was your experience like working on your masters at Eastman?
Interestingly enough, I remember the auditions for I guess it was for the jazz bands, and they would have everybody play a chorus of blues or something. And I remember hearing you and Phil Tolga and everybody. I'm like, wow, these trombone players, like every one of them, could improvise. And sort of where I had come from, New Orleans, there weren't many trombone players that could really, play fluently on the instrument and vocabulary and everything else. So that was really a great wake-up call. And like you said, just being around all these great, and I was a master's student. There were these students who were first year, second year, third year students who were playing great. So it just, like you said, just kicked you in the pants to practice more, and that's the best thing about being in a place like that. I think it's just you're influenced so much by your peers, and the competition is fierce. But I felt like it's friendly as well.
To me, it was a really great precursor to what you experience in New York. In the sense that it's a little more cutthroat in New York, but you're around great players who you can benefit from, and it's just kind of like a little bit of a microcosm of what was to come for all of us. I know there's a little bit of time. You spent some time in Rochester after you graduated, and then a little bit of movement to New York here. But your first major gig was with Woody Herman's band. Obviously, a rich history with that band of great bands and great saxophone players, great sax sections. What was that experience like for you, and how long were you on the band and all those kind of things?
Yeah, I was on the band for less than a year. I think I joined in June and then left in March. I was a little bit older than, like, Greg Gisbert was. Most of those guys were 22, and I was already 26, so I felt like I was a little older, but loved it. Loved. I'd always wanted to do the gig, and it took that time for some folks to leave, so there was an opening, which I was so glad to do it, and I'd wanted to do it for a long, long time. And primarily being an alto player, all through my undergrad, I started playing more tenor in grad school, specifically to hope to get on that gig.
Wow, okay.
And finally got my chance at it. I thought, I'm a little old for this, but, 26. But yeah, that's sort of how I felt at the time. So I loved it, and I could have done it forever, but I still felt like I needed to get off and sort of start another career. And the funny thing, I don't know how you felt about being on, well, you did Buddy and Woody, right?
Yeah.
I always thought, oh yeah, well, I've done this gig now. I'll move to New York. I'll start telling people I did Woody's gig, and I'll have gigs open up all over the place, Like everybody in New York played with Woody or Buddy
Yeah.
or you name it, Maynard, So
I know. I thought
it
the
was,
same thing. I was saying, but I mean, and Buddy even more so because he was so volatile and was firing people left, right, and center. So pretty much, you could throw a quarter in Times Square and hit somebody who played on Buddy Rich's band.
Exactly. Yeah, boy, that was a little bit of a shock. Moving to New York is a little bit of a shock that way because there's so much.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many people that have had so much experience, and yeah, that's the great thing about New York too.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who don't know, younger folks out there, Woody Herman's band was 3 tenors and Barry saxophone, so a little bit different configuration than the traditional big band section of 2 altos, 2 tenors, and Barry. Well, let's springboard right into your early years here in New York. I know you spent a little bit of time in Boston and then got down to New York. And yeah, just kind of like generally, what are your memories looking back on that time in your life and in your career, and just kind of people who helped you and important gigs that might have opened up things for you, and just how you remember feeling at that time?
Well, I mean, I remember doing some recording sessions that you recommended me for, which was really great, and I'll always be thankful for some of those things. And I felt like I was sort of a slow start for me. I mean, I did kind of figure that I'd better be versatile, and the more of that you are, I thought that you would have, you could do, you could do Broadway if you were a good doubler. You could do more recording situations, which had sort of started to crumble right after 1985, basically. The whole recording scene had just kind of gone downhill, or at least diversified. And so that's sort of what I thought it was going to be, more of that. But every gig leads to another, right? I mean, every person you meet, you never know what's going to, if you play good and impress them as someone who's going to show up and do a good job for you. I remember early on there was one week where I think I did a Broadway show sub, I did a recording session, a jazz gig. I mean, I was so happy, it was just great. It's like, this is what, why you come here, and of course everywhere there's just great players crawling everywhere. Right?
Yeah, so, absolutely.
I can't particularly think of any specific gigs that springboarded to other things. It just seems like it's just, you just do the work and show up and try to be the guy that makes things easier for whoever's leading it. Which actually I remember seeing you do that. Just being the guy that make things go easy for the leader. So
I remember there was one day, that I could do that. I remember that now. Well, that's our fine videographer Kent Smith, who is kind enough to be here today, and he and I were just talking before you got here about how your doubling prowess. So you mentioned versatility, and to me, you're one of the best doublers I've ever worked with, and your range of versatility is what always astonishes me. The fact that you can play oboe extremely well, English horn, flute, clarinet. So you've got double reeds, plus you're as a world-class jazz player. It's how did you approach developing all those skills? I mean, I'm assuming you didn't come out of Eastman with the ability to play oboe, but maybe not. I'd be interested to see how you balanced and got such expertise on all of your doubles.
Well, thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Truthful.
Eddie Daniels came to my college at Loyola, and he talked about having your clarinet and flute being sort of ratcheting each other up. Spend 3 months on the flute and make that your primary thing, and then keep the clarinet as a maintenance type of situation. So he talked a little bit about that, and I thought, well, that sounds like a good plan. I felt like I was really late to the game as a flute player. I couldn't,
really, wow.
For some reason I couldn't get it together. Like I was taking lessons with some people here and there. I never really had one person to really show me. So I thought, well, if I can't get this thing together, I better do something else. So I had gotten an oboe in my undergrad, and I thought, well, this felt a little more natural to do, and so I got some positive feelings about it, and went from there. I did take some lessons and had to start making reeds. I got this road gig on a show. Matter of fact, Ed Zach was on it
Oh, wow.
from Eastman, and some other folks, Dave Loeb.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so I was stuck on the road for I think about 3 or 4 months, having to deal with the oboe and making reeds, and that was such an education, but a great situation to kind of figure that out, or at least get started, because it's really a lifetime, man. That instrument, the oboe, is it's a vortex, you know, in a way, you know. Anyway, so that of course helped me get into the Broadway show scene.
Yeah.
Which I you know, in those days it was a fewer people, at least it seemed like it. I remember I went to. Did you ever go to see Bob Swan at Radio City?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And Ray Wright was like a conduit to that
great
whole
connection.
scene. Yeah.
And I didn't realize how lucky that was. But I remember I went into his office, and he pulled out the list of oboe doublers, and like 30 of them. You know,
Really?
I thought,
Wow.
30? I'm not going to ever get a gig, you know. But you know, a lot of those guys had other things, and they moved on, and you know, slowly kind of got in, and then it's still, I mean, still working on it, you know, and
It seems to be going well.
well, here, you know, I mean, maybe there's one thing that I tried to do that was helpful. I thought, if I'm going to play this instrument, whether it's flute or oboe or clarinet, I want to make it somehow, I want to get to the point where I can be creative on it and maybe make that part of my scene. So like I always tried to write something for the oboe, and on a couple of my recordings I played some oboe, and to kind of bring it into to where it felt personal and not just a way to for business, you know. So I tried to make it like part of, as I say, not for evil purposes, but you know, for good, you know, to be creative on it, and I really enjoyed doing that too, you know, like because you'd write a tune for the oboe or for the English horn, it'd be different than what I would write for saxophone, or you know, a tune that was swinging and with 2 5/1s and blah blah blah. For that instrument, it just seemed like it would be a little bit different genre or style. So I felt like that was something that kept me interested in the instrument, kept me practicing, and not just for you know, getting better to play someone else's music. So, but yeah, that's kind of how I looked at it.
And it you know, back to an earlier point I made, but what's really astounding to me about you is the level of jazz playing, and then you can, like you just said, you translated that to the oboe. But a lot of times, you know, and still to this day, we work with woodwind doublers, and a lot of times that's what they do is double. You know, their jazz playing maybe a secondary item, or not really even in play. Obviously, for you, it's like you've got all parts of the equation are covered. I was curious in terms of, we'll talk a little bit about Eastman more, but as far as the future of woodwind doubling, to me, especially with a bit of contraction that seems to be happening on Broadway, where there's smaller orchestras and whatnot. One of the chairs that I think that will always survive in the wind and brass world is a woodwind doubler, especially somebody who can play that many different axes. And I was curious if you work with your students in that and you're encouraging that. And I remember one time you told me the story about Joe Henderson coming to North Texas, and you know, one of the great jazz artists in the history of the music, and encouraging everybody to work on their doubles. But meanwhile, Joe was a really good doubler, and it's alto flute on, you know, all this. But anyway, do you feel like, I'm sure you pass that along to your students now, like, so as far as doubling goes?
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, and well, not a lot. We talk about it, and generally, I find though that age group is not interested in general. It's kind of a funny thing, like when they're seniors, suddenly they're, let me talk to Charles about flute and clarinet, like I've been talking about this for 4 years, and like, because they get parts in the jazz ensemble music, as you know, like tunes, and they'll bring a part in, and I'll say, well, wow, there's like some high E's and high F's that they don't know the fingerings for. I'll say, well, when's the concert? And they're like, tomorrow. Like, that's not really going to help much, But yeah, we do talk about it. I just feel like, I mean, from my viewpoint, back then, Eastman always had good woodwind doublers, like Bob Shepard, Paul McGinley, Rob Lockhart, these folks, and it just sort of had the reputation. Steve Kujala.
Right, oh yeah.
Great flute player.
Great flute player.
Oh, man. So even if we're not talking a lot about it all the time, I think the sort of the school sort of has that built in. At least I think it does. So they're pushed a little bit, but generally I think it's something that they're interested in only later when they come to New York and realize that it helps to be versatile.
That's a good point. And it makes sense. I mean, I remember when we were that age, you want to focus on the primary thing that you're working on, whether it be jazz or your primary instrument or whatever. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your composing and arranging. You've done such great work. I'm honored to be on both Electric Miles and Electric Miles 2. Such great writing and both really great records. You should everybody check those two out, Electric Miles 2. And I just wanted to share this one story. You may remember it, but I remember you said, oh, I just kind of did my first chart, or I don't know if it was your very first one, but early. And you said, he called a bunch of us who were doing shows, and hey, can we meet go to Michiko on between shows? And you showed up with like a big jug of red wine, and we're all classic, like big band, like passing it around with little Dixie cups. Well, we're living now. But at any rate, you passed out the chart and we played it down, and I'll never forget your reaction. You just looked up and you go, wow, humbling experience. And we were all like, let's play it again. And you were like, no, that's good. That was it.
I remember that, yeah.
And so they just kind of turned into a fun hang, seeing everybody. But you've gone from that to now, a really extremely gifted composer and arranger and writing these, marvelous arrangements for the Miles stuff and writing for studio orchestra. What motivated you to get into composing and arranging, and what do you think are kind of your keys to the success you've had? You've gotten a lot of critical success for both of those records.
Well, I remember that session and at Michiko's, and I think I remember you and Alan Ferber were playing, and I printed the parts, I taped them. I don't think I even looked at them. And apparently, I didn't have the multi-bar rests written in. I mean, they're literally like, you had to look at measure 117, 118, I mean, it was just things you just don't do. I mean, Anyway, that was so humbling. I mean, it just sounded like a wash of sound. Yeah, that's, well, I mean, when you write a chart, wow, it just takes years to, at least for me, to figure that out slowly, and I love studying it.
Yeah.
So, from a Mahler score to books on orchestration, the classic books on orchestration, looking at these different channels, people explaining some things about voicings. I mean, as you know, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube that just kind of guide you. And then I've got all the Ray Wright book, the Henry Mancini book, the Nelson Riddle book. I mean,
did you check Gary Lindsay's book?
I've got Gary's book.
Really great book.
Really great book. Yeah. And I had to get my ears attuned to listening for that. Matter of fact, let's tell this one story about Ray Wright. When we were there, I wrote a chart on dolphin dance.
Ah, okay.
Brought it in, and he'd have you stand in front of the band with him, and he would count it off. And I had this big introduction with some sort of sus chord, like E sus or something. And I had this trombones playing the, the roots in the sevenths or something, and the fourth. These big chordal voicings, and he cut the band off after like 8 bars, and he looked at me and he says, "Well, what do you think?" I'm like, "Wow, it sounded great," And so we did it again. The same thing, cut it off after 8 bars. Like, "What do you think?" So he was trying to get me to hear something. I don't know what it was. I'll never know.
He never told you.
But I'm thinking, actually speaking with Joel McNeely years and years later, he said I probably had some parallel fifths or something. I thought it sounded great. But you just one sound, you learn how to hear it better.
Yeah.
And I wasn't hearing it.
Yeah.
Now I hear it, and you can look at it and hear it, and So for me, it's I'm really slow at it, and it takes me months to put those things together. And I mean, thanks for the nice words about them. Every one of them was just so difficult for me to put together,
Yeah.
But yeah, you just get better at it. And matter of fact, Scott Winholt did a reading session once for me, and it was one of my early ones, and he said, "I don't know, just keep doing it,
Yeah.
And it's like that with almost anything you do, you just keep doing it. Because I don't feel particularly natural at all with that stuff. I just have to really think, and I constantly miss details, I guess everybody does,
Totally.
Just learning to think more like how those people work, the people that we admire, Gil and everybody else. Wow, what a process it is.
Yeah.
Lately I've been trying to write in like a Quincy Jones kind of era, where I'm really trying to figure out where to put things to where it just reads down. Because those mouse charts, I felt like they read down okay, but I felt like if I would have spent a little more time, they would have sounded good right away, and then instead of having to rehearse. But I will say that I first told Maria Schneider, I don't think I was in her band anymore, but we hung out once, and I said, I'm going to do this mouse project. And she said something that I thought was really good. She said, well, a lot of it is how you rehearse the band. If you have a voicing or a thing that's not sounding right, if you really take the time and say, well, maybe the trombones are too loud, or this is not balanced, but not only because it's an alto flute in the low register, maybe there's a way to make that work, And matter of fact, the last time I saw Gil Goldstein, he said something about that. You can have an alto flute low. You got to make room for it, So little things like that, man, you kind of remember them. I feel like it's almost like it's a lick. You remember, like, oh, I can do this. I can put the tenors with the trombones, and it'll push that sound out further. And it's just such a world that's fascinating for me.
Yeah.
And I'm spending more and more time doing that, and just loving it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, I look forward to hopefully being a part of stuff you do in the future, and even if not a part, I'll be a fan of what you're doing. So
you'll be a part.
That's great. That's great that you're enjoying it so much. And that's really great advice from Maria, I think, because I know myself, even just as a player, a lot of times I'm like, that chord should work. What's going on? And then the blend is huge. And like you're saying, or like Gil said, it just needs some space for certain textural things.
Right.
And and certainly as a leader and an arranger, so important to hear it on that level, because it's not always your writing that's creating an issue. It's good,
right.
Really good point. I find it interesting too, and we both were fortunate to play Sinatra's great Nelson Riddle charts, and they just talk about playing themselves. I mean, basically, if you can get out of bed and put your instrument together, those charts are going to play great. But Nelson was a trombone player, and he there were no arranging books back then, and so legend has it he would do little one stave things and ask the guys at the end of the session to hang out for a little bit and play another 8 bars, and then okay, thanks. He learned what he learned, and that's how he became. He just kind of like what you're saying. He just stayed at it, and it's fairly consistently that's the approach that's necessary. Well, let's shift again. Let's talk a little bit about being back at Eastman now as professor of jazz saxophone. Um, Doing great work up there, and I've heard many of your students and so many talented young players, and really I'm enjoying seeing the program now. Great teachers up there now, like Gary Versace and one of my favorite trombone players of all time, Marshall Jokes, is now teaching there. So I was really happy to see that the school hired Marshall, because it's going to boost that program in a significant way. But anyway, talk about going back now as the professor. How does that feel?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I've been there for 13 years now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I'm honored to be there, trying to uphold a tradition. That the jazz area started with Ray Ricker in terms of the saxophone. So yeah, when I first got there, I really didn't have enough materials that it made me create your own materials. I mean, and that's what Bill Dobbins did when he was there. Right? He transcribed all that stuff from Herbie voicings to Chick Corea, and transcribed some of the ensemble things to study for students to study. So I spent a lot of time coming up with exercises to hopefully increase technical facility on the instrument in the jazz area. So I've looked at like Hannon. I've looked at some Hannon exercises.
Oh,
wow.
How
can I take a Hannon piano exercise and kind of turn it into what to do over a Dorian mode for a saxophone? If you start on a low D, what can you do? So I spend a lot of time basically trying to trip up my students.
Wow,
that
cool.
if you can't play it, you should be able to play that. Or I tell them that because I practice this stuff, if I can play it, you should be able to play it. So I literally just have pages and pages of stuff that we go through to keep them hopefully moving forward. Matter of fact, the first year I was there, this young saxophone player wanted to play All the Things You Are in 7/4. I was like, great, that's a great, Brett Maldau had just come out with that record where he just careened all over it. It was amazing. So, and I never even tried that. 13 years ago, I hadn't played All the Things You Are in 7/4. So the student comes in, he wants to do it. Well, okay, let's do it. He comes back the next week. He's got All the Things You Are in 7/4 in 3 different keys. Okay, this is what we're dealing with. I better, I better start practicing, So now we're all doing that. I mean, we're playing this tune in different key centers, and that's what, as you know, with your sons, that's what they're doing in school these days. So it really keeps me on my toes. Hopefully, I'm keeping up, but it's very challenging sometimes. With some of the students are at the level where they're really playing so well and so completely. I feel like with some of those students, maybe what they need is some more fundamental things, and so I try to make sure that they have that too.
Right.
Because they want to go a different direction than what I'm hearing and what I have set out so far to work on. So I'm challenged by teaching some of those students.
Wow.
But it's great. I think we come to some sort of a agreement on what direction we're going to go. And I feel like with a student like that, your job is to basically facilitate them getting where they want to go to. Because there's some young saxophone players that they listen to that I don't know much about. So, and that's an interesting place to be in, like.
Sure.
How much of that is relevant to what I'm, or how much of what I'm giving them is relevant to what they need to get to where they want to go. So it's a challenge, but like I say when people ask how is it teaching, I'm like, well, it's great because basically talk about Sonny Stitt all day,
Yeah.
What could be better,
Yeah, right.
So. But yeah, it's challenging.
Yeah.
Challenging.
I would imagine that's a really interesting perspective. You're learning about younger players that they listen to that,
Yeah.
they're not, yeah.
And, but, the other side of the coin is, though, that you talked about Joe Henderson earlier. Some of these students and I don't mean this in a negative way, but they don't really know much about Joe Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our generation thinks he's one of the top people that play the saxophone, but there's been so much time have passed since he was the guy that they have their new people that have sort of taken their place, and in their eyes are the most important. So, but the other side of that, I think, is that when I start talking about Joe Henderson, and actually I have pages and pages of what I call Joe Henderson exercises. So from what I've transcribed of him, I figured out maybe a little bit of the key to what he practiced.
Okay.
A little bit. I don't know. I never met him. Well, they did record it on his big band, but he wasn't communicative with anybody at the session. But
he likes his alone time.
Yeah. Although he did ask us for reeds, which was kind of funny. Okay. Yeah, so the saxophone player, we were pulling out our reeds, giving them to them. You know? But you know, they I think it's easy to underestimate the impact that you have. So I start talking about Joe Henderson and Joe Henderson and Joe Henderson, and whereas before I had a student just a few weeks ago say, you know, I didn't really know much about Joe Henderson, and now I'm checking him out. He's unbelievable.
Wow.
He's just not in the media these days.
Right.
You know, he's been gone since around 1999, I think. I forget. But you know, so I kind of underestimate the impact that you can have when you start talking about a player. It impacts them, and they go dig up some stuff, and they say, "Wow, this is unbelievable," you know. So there's that aspect of it too, which is great, because you think they should know about Joe Henderson, and they should know about a lot of other people that aren't in the media these days at all, or just sort of, you know, how history kind of forgets some of these figures. And
no doubt, yeah.
But you know, matter of fact, we have a studio class every week, and one of them is usually on forgotten players, forgotten saxophone players that they probably don't know about. Junior Cook.
Yeah, well,
you know, someone like that they, I think they need to. They need to know. So, but it's you know, you think about it, you know, the history of that music. There's a lot of names, you know, and they can't know all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know all of them. I mean, there's people that weren't around when I was coming up. So, anyway, it's interesting to be in.
I wanted to talk about jazz education a little bit, and we've had some dedicated interviews on the series focusing on that. In particular, one that comes to mind is with the great jazz educator Justin DeChocho, talking about you know, the undergraduate jazz degree, which I think is wildly popular, successful, important, but also it has its challenges. And I know when we were at Eastman, there wasn't an undergraduate jazz degree. So I was a classical trombone major myself. And I felt like in addition to being around great players, what I got the most out of Eastman was the various ensembles I got to play in. So you're playing in an orchestra, you're playing in a wind ensemble, you're playing in a brass quintet, you're playing in jazz ensemble, small group, whatever it might be. And I'm certainly never going to be, you know, a member of the New York Philharmonic or the Chicago Symphony, but if I'm on a recording session with Joe Alessi, whatever, I can, you know, kind of deal, you know, and hold my own a little bit. And I feel like that has helped me a lot in terms of just making a living as playing the trombone. Obviously, it's a little bit different for the saxophone, since that element is more skewed towards the jazz side of things. So I get it. But how do you feel like, as far as in general jazz education, but in particular at Eastman, are there still opportunities to cross over? Or I've heard some places say, well, the jazz majors, they do the jazz thing, and you know, you're not going to see the you know, inside of Eastman Theater as a member of the Philharmonia or whatever orchestra, you know. But I was curious your perspective on that, in terms of having this degree now, which is very common, an undergraduate jazz degree, but also the ability to get to do other things that could help you down the road.
Well, that's a good point. You mentioned, you know, Joe Alessi and having, you know, a good sound on the instrument, coming from the Eastman tradition of Emery Remington.
Sure.
Remington. Yeah, I feel like some of that has not as strong as it used to be because there's not this sort of, you got to be a good doubler, you got to have a good sound in case you have a studio date. I think the sound parameters are so wide now in terms of what's sort of an acceptable jazz sound on the saxophone. And I have some students, have had students and still have students whose sounds are not as refined as maybe I think they should be. But that's kind of what they're hearing, and they're thinking, well, I'm gonna just be playing jazz. They can sound however they want almost, and they don't envision themselves being in a recording session in a sax section and a trombone section and trumpet section playing a big band or something, and I'm going to be hired because of my individuality. So that's an interesting point. And I mean, I try to stress the importance of having a versatile sound on your instrument. So if you do get a recording session and you have to play in a 3-horn section for a pop gig or something, or a sax section, or any other combination, you got to play in tune, you have to articulate. Where in jazz, I know this sounds strange too, but you don't have to. You can do whatever you want. I'm an expressive artist. So that's a tough one, man.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, there's certainly more room for individuality in jazz, and it's safe to say,
Yeah. The parameters are just so wide. Like there's not in many ways, there's one flute sound, there's one clarinet sound that's acceptable. There's more than that, obviously, but with saxophone, it seems like it's very, very wide, and you get a range from, someone who wants to sound like Stan Getz to someone who wants to sound like Albert Eiler, and everything in between.
Wow, yeah, there's a big space in between those two. Yeah, well, that's a really interesting perspective. So I think, right, just even having the versatility within the sound on your instrument, and I'm sure that carries over for you for clarinet, flute, oboe, English horn.
I mean, is that way for trombone? Is sort of there's parameters, obviously, but I mean, the way I hear it, it seems like you get a good sound and you can articulate and play in tune, and that's you got to start there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my kind of goofball thing is STP, sound, time, pitch. Those are the three and the only one of them that's subjective is sound. So okay, I mean, time and pitch are not subjective; it's objective for sure. But if you have those three, and just a really good sound, and there's different good sounds on every instrument, it's really good. If you don't mind, I'll give you credit, but I'm going to use that in clinics and whatnot. but the versatility of the sound is really it's a very great way to look at it. I know some of our listeners get mad at me when I don't talk about equipment, especially for our brass players. So I'm sure it's similar. I know saxophone player friends of ours who were talk about equipment. Just give us a rundown on what you play, your saxophones, your oboes. I'm always interested. I remember when we were at Eastman, I was talking to an oboe player, and they were talking about how they have to make their own reeds. I was just like, what? And but anyway, so the whole. I'd just be curious, and your flutes and what equipment you're on.
Yeah, I just got a new flute, which I'm loving. It's a Miramatsu.
Oh, okay.
During just before the pandemic, my father passed away and left a little bit of money. So one of the things I wanted to do, and I think he would have. Been happy about this. But a really nice flute, which are just great, Miramatsu. Another really good flute that I have is a sonare, which is basically a Chinese-made instrument in cooperation with the Powell company.
Oh, okay.
Powell makes the head joint, and so it's been great. I played it for years.
Wow.
And still do. So I've got 2 C flutes. I have a sonare alto flute, which is really great. If anyone is interested,
Oh, and I will be employing you for this project my son and I are working on. So keep that thing fired up.
That's a good instrument. They figured out some good stuff with that axe. I used to have an older instrument. Do you remember that recording we did with Sinatra did the duets recording.
Sure.
I think I bought the alto flute that day. Over at Sam Ash, I bought this Armstrong that wasn't very good.
Wow.
But then I have a Dietzau bass flute that I love.
Oh, wow.
It's great.
Okay.
Clarinets. I have a Selmer bass clarinet that's really great. Low concert, low B flat. That's been great. We use that a lot. Recording on that quite often, and it's a really good instrument. I have a buffet clarinet. Let's see what else. We got a balanced action tenor.
Wow.
That I love. And I have a Selmer Mark VI alto.
Okay.
Let's see, a Yamaha soprano. I just got a Conn baritone that I've been playing a little bit. That's really fun.
Okay.
Really fun to play. Let's see. The oboe is a Laubin, which is made in Peekskill, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, it's great. It was kind of the a lot of classical players, or well, I shouldn't say this, but my understanding was the Laubin was more of like a New York studio doublers oboe. I think George Marge played a Laubin, I believe. I have a Marigot English horn that I bought years ago that stood up for a long time. What else? Is that it? Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of investing.
You don't want to talk about. You don't want to talk about mouthpieces.
No, we'll save that for our second interview. No, very cool though. It's been good to hear about all that, and I know like brass players, complain about the cost of brass instruments these days and whatnot, and boy, but when you start talking about woodwinds, that's a whole nother level of expense for sure. So I have a lot of respect for those quality instruments that you gather over the course of a career. It's very cool. Charles, as we kind of wind down a little bit here, what are you working on right now? What are you thinking about in terms of your future projects? I'm sure you're planning on being at Eastman for significant amount of time still, and musically, what are you looking at here for the future?
Well, lately I did a concert. Actually, Marshall played. I wrote. Arranged music from Porgy and Bess for an octet with vocalist Sarah Gazarek sang with us.
Oh, nice!
And so I'm looking to record that soon here in New York.
Wow, great!
Maybe you'll be around.
I'd love to do it, although I certainly understand if you hire Marshall.
This octet thing is really fun. The thing we did with Amy Azara. Kind of got me into that group. I really like the sound of 5 or maybe 6 horns. Yeah. So
that was a really fun session. She's fabulous.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah, what a great singer.
Oh man. So I'm trying to write more along those lines. And there's a couple of students up at Eastman, jazz vocal students that I'm writing something for, and that's kind of what I'm really busy doing. Which is great. Sure. I like I said before, I really love trying to figure that out. So 6 horns is a fun group sound for me. So I'm really interested in that.
Yeah, great. We can't wait to hear it and hopefully get to participate. And,
absolutely.
Charles, I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I know you got to run into town to do a session this afternoon, and thanks for coming over to NIAC, and it's great to hear just more about I knew a lot of the things we talked about, but just hearing the more scope in terms of your career, and great career, and it's still going strong. It's awesome. I always kind of wrap our interviews up by asking the artists that we are fortunate to talk to, like, if you just could pare it down to one thing in terms of young musicians that are coming up that are looking at what you've done over the course of your career and are saying to themselves, "Oh, I want to be like Charles Pillow," or what if you could almost put, it doesn't have to be a singular piece of advice, but a succinct point of advice, what would you offer to young folks looking at this business that we've been in for so long?
I heard Ron Carter say, learn the repertoire, learn your instrument, and then show up a half hour early.
Wow, so, that covers it, doesn't it?
Wow, that's a lot, right? It is really good.
Wow,
kind of that.
There it is.
I really like that.
There it is.
Learn your instrument. That's, and show up on time.
Yeah.
And be nice to people.
Yeah.
You know.
That's it. Well, there you go. The keys to success, and they are keys to success. But Charles, thank you so much.
Mike, thanks for
great to
having
see
me.
you, and can't wait to have many, many years together. And
I'm honored to be here.
It's totally our pleasure. I hope everybody enjoyed this as much as I did. It's super fun to sit down with Charles, such a great musician and human being. And we will see all of you next time on Bone to Pick.